I'm Olive, and at the young age of just 23, I've decided I'm totally done with love. Why, you ask? Well, because all men are jerks, liars, and fraudsters. They're like magpies. They're always looking for something new and shiny to come along. So, your boyfriend is different? Yeah, whatever. I've heard it all before. I've believed it all before, too. Trust me. But as much as it sucks to hear that all guys are the same, I'll tell you why. It all began back in high school when I had a massive crush on this boy called Xavier. He was so dreamy, handsome, and talented. We bonded over our love for music, and we were in the same school choir together. Every musician has a muse, right? I believed that I was Xavier's only muse and no one could replace me. In my eyes, he could do nothing wrong. Being around him filled me with butterflies, and I couldn't wait to go to college with him and share my life with him. But then, I caught him in the music room, kissing some other girl. I felt so broken and ran off. I just didn't understand how a boy who I thought cared about me could hurt me so badly. I turned into a zombie version of myself. I could barely eat anything, and I refused to go to school as there's no way I could face seeing him with her. In the end, my mom was so concerned about me that she let me change schools. The problem was that it might have been a new school, but it was still full of jerky guys. I started dating this boy called Justin, but then he broke up with me for my friend Rosie. I had to endure sitting alone in the canteen and watching them feed each other yogurt. Gross. I thought that going to college would change my bad luck with guys and that they'd be more grown up about relationships. But no, turns out my first college boyfriend, Thomas, was two-timing me the whole time. I was clearly a magnet for bad guys, so I decided to use it to my advantage. In fact, their bad behavior is so predictable that I've managed to build a career on it. So after I graduated from college with a degree in business administration, I convinced my family to lend me money so I could open up my love trap business. Do you want to find out if your boyfriend's loyal or not? Well, my business can help with that. Hire me, and I can tell you if you're wasting your time with that charming guy or if he's one in a zillion. This isn't an investigation service or your regular kind of honey trap company. No. Instead, I help my clients determine if their partner is faithful or not, even before he actually has an affair with someone. Why waste your time and effort with a man who has a wandering eye? It's simple, really. If your partner likes tall brunettes, I'll send a beautiful girl fitting this description over to the place he'll be at. Naturally, I have different service packages to choose from to suit all budgets. For instance, level 1 is a brief encounter in a chosen location, while level 3 ups the stakes. Trust me, few guys can resist a super sexy woman. If your boyfriend passed our challenges, congratulations. But if he didn't, then we'd have pictures, videos, and messages to back it up. Of course, my client's discretion was the utmost importance to me. So, if questioned, then my girls would deny being hired, and who by? And they'd never go beyond the limits or allow themselves to develop feelings for the guy. As crazy as it sounds, I was doing really well with this job. Business was booming, and although seeing my clients burst into tears when I handed them pictures of their guy flirting with one of my girls wasn't fun, exposing a cheater made me feel satisfied. Then everything changed when Amy showed up at my office. She seemed like any normal client at first. She loved her boyfriend, but she just wasn't fully sure if she could trust him. A normal, boring case. At least, I thought it was until I opened up the folder with the information about her boyfriend. There, staring back at me, was a picture of Xavier. Whoa, I wasn't expecting that. Still, I kept my cool, smiled sweetly at Amy, and said, "Leave it to me." As if I was going to turn down this job and a large sum of money just because I had history with Xavier. Amy didn't know that, and she didn't need to. I'd send another girl along, catch him out, then voila. Amy would see what a jerk he was. Only that evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked through his folder. Geez, I'd forgotten just how handsome he was. By my third glass of wine, I decided that no one knew Xavier better than me. Therefore, I needed to use myself as bait and catch him out. The next evening, I put on my favorite dress and I went to the bar Amy said he'd be at. There he was, sitting at the bar and flirting with the pretty bartender. Some things never change. Then he turned and saw me. He looked shocked and said, Olive? Is that you? Oh, hi, Xavier. I smiled bitterly. The last time I saw you, weren't you having fun with your new muse in the music room? He looked confused and said he didn't understand what I was talking about, so I gave him a refresher. I thought he'd be ashamed that I caught him out as a cheater, but then he responded, "No, you've got the wrong idea. We were just practicing for the school play when she tried to kiss me all of the sudden. I bet you didn't stay until the next moment to see me push her away and tell her I already had my girlfriend. You're my one and only Olive, my muse." Suddenly, I felt so stupid that I didn't ask him directly that day, and just ran away without a word. If I had, then I could have had my dream life with him, and never had to experience those jerk guys. As I looked into his dreamy eyes, I realized that I still loved him, and I knew he loved me too. That Amy girl wasn't right for him. So when he asked me to go back to a hotel room with him, I didn't think twice about saying yes. After that, we started dating, and it felt good being able to trust a guy again. He was always spoiling me with romantic weekend trips and taking me out to expensive restaurants. But then one night, when I was with him at a hotel, and he was out of the room, his phone beeped, and I saw a message from Amy pop up. So when he returned, I used this as my chance to ask him, "Who's Amy?" He touched my hand and told me that she was just some silly girl he was pretending to date so her father's company would hire him for a big job. He promised that after his business contract ended, he wouldn't talk to her again. I'd failed to trust Xavier once before, and I wasn't about to do it again. Also, I need to help him with his business. So when Amy came to my office, I put on a smile and said, "Congrats, Xavier's one of the good guys." "Is that right?" She raised an eyebrow. Then she threw a pile of photos on the table between us. There were pictures of me and Xavier at the bar, at the mall, on our recent short trip away, and in a hotel foyer. Talk about a shocker. It turns out Amy wasn't as naive as I thought she was. She scowled at me and said, "Does your place even have rules for going to hotels with the customer's boyfriend to challenge him? Prepare yourself to go to courts, fraudsters." She left, leaving me trembling with fear. I was about to lose my business, and it was all my own fault. But at least I still had Xavier, the love of my life, right? I called him up in tears and expected him to comfort me. Instead, he yelled out, "You ruined it all, you loser! How dare you let Amy know about your embarrassing affair? Do you really think I'd leave a good girl like Amy for someone awful like you? Prepare for the trial, since my testimony will put you at a disadvantage." Now, I have a ruined career and a dented pride. I'm tired and exhausted, and the last remaining belief in love I had has been lost forever. But worse still, I don't trust myself. I hate the fact that I fell for Xavier's charms not once, but twice. But if I manage to get through this lawsuit without losing everything, then I want to start a new business. I don't want to be bitter forever. Instead, I want to do something with my life. Something that doesn't involve love, heartbreak, or anything in between, as I'm keeping my heart a no-go zone from now on.
I'm sure that you've all heard the phrase, "you reap what you sow." Well, I didn't really grasp what that meant until it happened to me. I'm Samuel, by the way, but you can call me Sam. I'm 21 and currently a college student. A few months ago, I did something awful to my girlfriend, and I'm still paying the price. If only I could go back in time. It all started back in high school. Stella and I grew up together in a small town just outside of Nashville, and we were totally in love. When it came time to go to college, we both chose to study in Nashville, but at different colleges. Stella was the sweetest girl I'd ever known, and our big plan was to get married after college and start a family. She chose to study education so she could become a teacher. Her studies were so full on, she was busy all the time, whereas I'd chosen business school, and even though it was busy, I wasn't as crazy as studying education. I actually had quite a lot of spare time, so I ended up joining an entrepreneur club. Seeing as I wanted to start my own business one day, Stella totally encouraged me, and even though it meant we didn't see each other much, things were still okay between us. But pretty soon, things started to change. The more new people I met, the more I realized I was growing apart from Stella, and that, in actual fact, she kind of bored me. All she talked about were her classes. And even though she still loved me so much, I mean, she was the same old girl for years. Things just felt dull between us. So when a new girl called Jenny joined the Entrepreneur Club, I couldn't help but notice her. She was 3 years younger than me and so gorgeous. She liked wearing tight clothes, which could show all her body's curves. All the guys couldn't take her eyes off her, me included. One time, seeing Jenny stand in the corner of our club room scrolling her phone, I decided to approach her and see if she was as sweet as her look. I walked up to her and said, "Hey, are you a camera?" She looked confused and said, "Huh?" So I said, "Because when I look at you, I can't help but smile." She didn't even laugh. She just flipped her hair and walked off saying, "Nice try, but no thanks." Even though she hadn't been impressed by my attempt at a pickup line, I couldn't give up. If there was one thing in life I loved, it was a challenge. So from that moment on, I challenged myself to win her over. I know this was wrong because I had Stella, but guys, I was bored. However, a couple days later, there was a rumor going around that Jenny and our club's president, Max, were dating. Well, turns out this was indeed true, and to say I was disappointed would be an understatement. But I already had a girlfriend, so I tried to shake it off. A few weeks later, I was walking on the street when I heard an argument. I realized it was Max and Jenny, and I couldn't help but eavesdrop. The last thing I heard Jenny say before she stormed off was, "Just wait and see." Then suddenly, she bumped into me and fell onto the ground. I quickly helped her up and apologized, but Jenny said, "Sorry, Sam, I'm so upset." I felt so bad for her, so I offered to take her home and make sure she was okay. I called us a cab and we climbed in. Little did I know Max was watching us from across the street. In the cab, we were silent. Then eventually I plucked up the courage to ask, "So, you and Max, what happened?" And Jenny said that they'd broken up because he didn't like her wearing tight clothing. She said she could wear whatever she wanted and asked if I agreed. So I said, "Yeah, of course. It's your body. If I were Max, I'd be so proud to have such a beautiful girlfriend." After I said that, Jenny leaned her head on my shoulder. I couldn't believe it. Soon, she'd be all mine. But hang on. What about Stella? I decided to not say anything to her at that moment because she was busy with exams. As soon as I got Jenny, I'd break up with Stella. After that, Jenny started opening up to me more. We often text until after midnight. And in the club, she started to bring me snacks and even stayed behind to help me clean up after. She was even flirting with me, and everyone in the club had noticed, including Max. He didn't approach me about it, but I often caught him staring at me in a nasty way. As for Stella, she still called me often, but I was kind of quiet. She came to my place one day and insisted on making me dinner. She said it'd been a while since our last time together. So I reluctantly spent time with her, but to be honest, I didn't care. During the meal, I just fastened my eyes on the phone to text Jenny. I knew that Stella noticed the change in me as I looked up. I caught her sadly suspicious gaze. I was kind of nervous. Was she going to question me? What should I say? At that moment, I couldn't find any excuse for my inattention. But I wasn't ready to tell her the truth yet. My relationship with Jenny wasn't official, so I didn't want to break up with Stella. But still, she didn't say anything, so I also kept quiet. Phew! One weekend, I went to a board game cafe with the club members. Jenny also came, and when it was time to head home, she asked if I could drop her home. Obviously, I agreed, and Jenny gave me a big hug. When I looked to the left, I saw Max watching us. But neither me nor Jenny cared one bit. "Move over, Max. Jenny's mine now," I thought to myself. In the car on the way home, we chatted a lot, and she said she'd heard I already had a girlfriend. I found myself opening up about Stella, and even told Jenny how boring she was. Jenny didn't say much, but when we got to her house, she asked if I wanted to come in for a bit and have a beer. I mean, I didn't have to think twice about my answer, and I don't think I need to spell out to you about what happened next. Well, after that night, Jenny still came to the club, and we continued on as friends, acting as if nothing had happened between us. But a month later, she suddenly texted me, and my life flipped upside down. "Sam, I'm pregnant," she said. And she'd even send me a photo of the positive pregnancy test. I was so shocked. How could this have happened? I immediately went over to her place and even bought another pregnancy test for her, just to make sure. Well, there was no doubt it was positive. So I told her I'd stand by her and share the responsibility. After that, I decided to break up with Stella. I talked to her on the phone and said we were too different. She was such an introvert while I was an active and open person. Of course, it broke her heart. She tried to hold me, but I was going to become a father, and Jenny needed me. Plus, I wasn't interested in Stella anymore. Over the next little while, I spent a lot of time with Jenny, and we officially started dating. I went into full-on protective mode. I picked her up every time we went out, like going to school, to our club. In public, I always took care of her, from the smallest things, such as getting her food and water, opening the car door, and so on. And of course, Jenny was very happy. Every time I did a thing for her, she always showed people how sweet and caring I was. Hearing that, the happier I was, and the more I cared for her. When there were only 2 of us, I brought her food and pregnancy pills to make sure she was okay. I started reading books about raising a kid. She liked to take pictures of all that stuff and post it online. Maybe she was really proud of a boyfriend like me. Eventually, I started to realize that this kid deserves a perfect family, so I decided to propose to Jenny. Sure, we might not get married for a while, but an engagement would at least make things more real. I bought the ring and arranged everything. I chose her favorite restaurant, and just before dessert, I got down on one knee and said, "I know we're moving fast, and you might not be ready, but I love you, and I want our baby to have the best life. I'll always take care of you both, and can't wait to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" I waited, and Jenny looked shocked. Then suddenly she asked me to stand up and looked so embarrassed. Then she said, well, this is awkward. I couldn't believe it. I asked her why, and she said, "Well, I'm not actually pregnant, so I'm sorry you kinda broke up with your girlfriend for no reason." I didn't understand. I said in shock, "But the test was positive." And Jenny said, "Oh man, I was gonna tell you sooner or later. Actually, the test wasn't even mine. I borrowed it from a pregnant woman. I just wanted to get my own back on Max and prove to him that other guys also want me and that I can live without him." Oh my God, was she for real? I couldn't believe it. So I said to her, "So, you used me?" Then she almost laughed and said, "Well, duh. I mean, get real. We barely know each other. Why would we get married?" "Yeah, well done. You got me," I bitterly said. "Thanks," Jenny replied with a blank face. Then she just got up and left. I felt sick. Turned out Jenny was just a liar. She'd done all this just to get back to her ex. She played me like a fool, and I'd fallen for it. Poor Stella. How could I have treated her like that? And that's when I realized I deserved it. I'd treated Stella so badly, and now Jenny had done the same thing to me. Stella had always been there for me. She was the sweetest girl ever, and my stupid wandering eyes had led me to Jenny. Well, it served me right. But I had to apologize to Stella, even if she didn't forgive me. I couldn't live with myself knowing how much I'd messed up. So it's true what they say. You reap what you sow. I certainly learned that the hard way. And I can't blame anyone but myself. Lesson well and truly learned.
Have you ever wondered what being a parent would be like? How about if you suddenly became a parent and your parent became a teenager? Well, it happened to me, and I'm here to tell you all about it. Hello, everybody. My name's Heaven, and I'm 17. But don't let my name deceive you, because this Heaven came straight out of hell. I suppose I've never been the easiest child. Back when I was younger, I had a lot of temper tantrums and outbursts. Once, when I was 8, this boy took the green crayon I wanted, so I snatched it off him, then snapped it in half. He burst into tears, and the teacher got involved and tried to put me in the timeout corner, so I screamed at her and even gave her some bruises. The teacher rang my parents and told them this was the last strike, and I'd been expelled. When they picked me up, my dad just sighed and stayed quiet, but my mom yelled at me. "Well, I hope you're happy now, Heaven. You've brought shame to our family, and now we've got to find another school willing to take you." Now, 9 years later, and the relationship between Mom and me is worse than ever. We just don't see eye to eye on anything. To be honest, we're like strangers. She has absolutely no idea what it feels like to be a teenager, and her super strict rules are ridiculous, such as no boyfriends until I'm 18. No parties, no drinking, no staying out past 8:30 p.m., no unhealthy foods. No. She was such a fun killer. Jeez, who was she to try and control me like this? Ugh. Me being me, I tried to find my way around these stupid rules. I made out I was having a girly sleepover at my friend Clara's house, then ended up going to a party. I said I was at an after-school club, when really, I went on a date with a boy, and I chucked the healthy packed lunches she made me in the trash and ordered a greasy burger and loaded cheese fries instead. I hated the fact that Mom was ruining my life with all of her dumb rules, and she hated the fact that I didn't respect her enough to follow her dumb rules. Because of this, we argued. A lot. And my little bro John and my dad often found themselves stuck in the middle. I guess that they couldn't stand the icy atmosphere between us. So eventually, they themselves prepared for a family day out. And it was certainly going to fix nothing. Her rules still followed us to the park, and she'd even stopped me talking to this really cute guy and shouted at me to go mind John. Ugh! I wasn't here to be a maid! Then, when we got home, she insisted I help her cook dinner. So I poured Dad a beer, and when I thought Mom wasn't looking, I slurped back the rest of the can. Suddenly, my mom screamed out, "What do you think you're doing? You're too young to be drinking!" I just rolled my eyes and said, "What? It was a tiny sip. Stop being so uptight, else you'll turn into a wrinkly old prune." Then I threw the can on the floor and walked off. She gave me a fierce glare, but I didn't care. How could she be just so serious? So when we were all sitting around the table for dinner, I could feel the tension between me and Mom. She passed John a plate full of chicken nuggets, but she passed me a plate heaped full of broccoli. Yuck! Where are my nuggets? I asked. Mom replied, "John is a growing boy. You, however, need to eat some vegetables, as you're getting a little chubby." How dare she? I wasn't even fat. In fact, I'm so skinny, I could be a model. If anyone needed to watch their weight, it was her, not me. She was the one squeezing herself into her old pair of skinny jeans. So I grabbed my plate of broccoli and threw it in the trash. Mom got up and said, "Fine, go hungry. See if I care. And you can clean up after yourself from now on." I yelled back, "Ridiculous! There's nothing in my stomach and you're giving me chores? Is this child abuse?" But then my dad startled us by slamming his fist on the table. "That's enough! Both of you! Start acting like grown-ups!" We both muttered out sorry. Then Dad came up with his bonkers idea. "Okay, so if you two cannot live in harmony, why don't you trade places?" Mom and I were kind of confused. "What do you mean?" I said to him. "Well, it's simple. Heaven, you'll switch places with Mom and do the housework, shopping, making dinner, and taking care of John, and so on. While Ariana," he looked at Mom, "you'll relive your teenage years and go to school. Let's say, for 2 days." Mom looked thrilled at the prospect of being me. As for me, I wasn't convinced. I mean, who likes doing chores? Besides, tomorrow at school was class picnic day, which meant no classes, lots of tasty food, and plenty of time to stare at cute boys. But Mom seemed so excited at the idea of being me, so I decided I could take advantage of this. "Does this mean I don't have to follow any stupid rules?" I asked, and Mom and Dad nodded in agreement. "Okay then, all the strict rules are gone." "Does this mean I can eat chocolate in bed?" John asked. I grinned. "You betcha!" Mom just shrugged and said, "It's okay, Mom. Now I have to prepare stuff for my picnic." And she excitedly ran upstairs. This would be a breeze, right? I mean, how hard could being Mom actually be? The next morning, John woke me up extra early and insisted I make him breakfast. Yawn. While I was pouring cereal into a bowl for him, Mom appeared. She was wearing her hat backwards. Geez, someone seriously needed to tell her it wasn't the 90s anymore. "Have fun, Ariana." I winked at her. "You too, Mom." She winked back. I watched her through the window. As she got on the school bus, she turned to me and did the peace out sign. Geez, could she be any more uncool? Whatever, she could be as cringy as she wanted. I didn't care, as I had the whole day at home alone. Or at least, until I had to pick up my bro from school. I didn't bother loading up the dishwasher, and I sidestepped past the massive pile of laundry and decided to spend the morning on the couch watching a chick flick and painting my nails. This was the life. A few hours passed, and I was so bored and hungry, so I went into the kitchen to look for food. But the cupboards were empty. Then I noticed a shopping list and some money on the counter. Reluctantly, I walked to the local store, but I ignored the list and bought lots of snacks. Hey, I was mom, so I made the rules. In the end, I found myself so bored that I actually ended up doing the laundry. I didn't really know what I was doing, so I threw everything into the machine, fiddled with the dial, and hoped for the best. Then my phone rang. It was Clara. So I answered and she said, "Hey, why is your mom here instead of you?" I told her about the switch up, then asked her what my mom was up to. She was quiet for a second, then said, well, she's definitely enjoying the picnic. In fact, she's showing Mrs. Puller her dabbing skills." What? My mom was dabbing? Which no one did anymore. And in front of our ancient science teacher? Was she trying to humiliate me? Whatever, my mom could get on with it. I had house chores to do. Geez, what's with chores? They seriously never seem to end. By the end of the day, I was so exhausted that I ordered takeout for everyone, then slumped in front of the TV. I finally had the option to stay out late, but I didn't have the energy to do it. Then, the next day, when I was doing yet more house chores, my friend Patrick sent me a photo. It was Mom. She was wearing a cheerleader's outfit that exposed her midriff. What? She was just at a casual football match. No one dressed up for that. Then Patrick sent me another picture. In it, Mom was fiddling with her hair and touching some jock's shoulder. OMG. Was she trying to flirt with him? Whatever. I didn't have time for this. I had to go pick John up from school, then go to the grocery store to get supplies for dinner. We arrived home to find Mom slumped on the couch, surrounded by empty wrappers and cans. On seeing me, she said, "Oh, you're back." I told John to go to his room, then I stormed over to Mom and said, "What's with all this mess? Clean it up." She just smirked at me and said, "Nah, you never clean it up, so why should I? After all, we have switched places, remember?" She finished her beer, then burped loudly before she threw the can at my feet, then walked off. This was so annoying. I'd already tidied the living room once today, and now I had to do it again. My mom was so unfair. Then, when I finally managed to grab 5 minutes to relax with a hot chocolate, loud thudding sounds were coming from upstairs. It was her music. It was so loud, it made the ceiling shake. Geez, she was so annoying. Then suddenly, it dawned on me. This was how I acted. Mom was just being me. So, okay, I guess I was a little harsh at times. I suppose being mom wasn't as easy as it looks. So I decided to make amends by making a delicious dinner. But there was one problem. I can't cook. In fact, the last time I tried to cook, I set the crepes and the pan on fire. So, for safety purposes, I asked Clara and Patrick to help me. They had cooking class, so they knew what to do. We created a feast of barbecue ribs, burgers, cornbread, salad, grape punch, and for dessert, a chocolate lava cake and blueberry pie. I swear they looked so good, I wanted to drool all over them. Mom came downstairs chewing her gum and scrolling through her phone, but then she looked at the food and stuttered, How did you make all of this? Not even I could make this many meals." I just shrugged and said, "I had a little help from my friends. No biggie." Then I stopped in front of Mom and said, "I'm sorry that I've been a bad daughter. I know you do a lot for me, and I promise I'll be better from now on." Mom started crying and said, "I'm sorry too. I know it isn't easy being your age. I can't keep up with the trends. I thought dabbing was popular. Anyway, from now on, I'll be fair to you, and we'll have fun together." After that, we hugged it out. Then my dad stood up and said, "Well, now anyone want to trade places with me?" John immediately raised his hand, and all could see his eyes light up. Soon, we all burst out laughing, thinking about one day John will go to work and talk about dinosaurs at the meetings. Meanwhile, my dad is building a Lego castle for John's kindergarten girlfriend. My family is now happier than ever. It's all thanks to my dad's crazy idea. You should never disrespect your parents. Otherwise, you might just find yourself living in their shoes. Literally. And trust me, I'll take strict rules and being nagging parents any day if the alternative is grocery shopping and house chores. Ugh!
Hi guys, I'm Alex. I'm a 24-year-old guy who's married to my high school sweetheart Ariel. Even though we haven't had kids yet, Ariel stays at home and I go to work. Sounds blissful, right? Wrong. You see, my once cute and loving wife is now a total grumpy control freak. Don't get me wrong, I still love her very much, but, well, who am I kidding? I'm just the henpecked husband who never dares to oppose her. No longer am I a free man. Instead, she insisted I follow her rules, and I swear she makes most of them up as she goes along. No going out with friends. No overnight trips away, even if they're work-related. Dinner is not allowed outside unless I take her with me. No talking to work colleagues on social media. I'm not even allowed to fall asleep first, else she wakes me up by yelling at me. If I dare to break those rules, then I have to face the consequences, and trust me, they weren't worth thinking about. For instance, I once stayed a little late at work, so the next day she made me moldy sandwiches. I didn't notice until I'd taken a big bite out of it. Ugh, gross. Another time I visited my parents after work without her, so she turned my white shirts pink. I had to go to work resembling the Pink Panther. And every day I come home from work to her endless complaints. She could moan on about the most ridiculous things, such as the puddle outside of our house meant she couldn't go for a walk, as she didn't want to ruin her shoes. And she'd accidentally drunk normal coffee instead of decaf, and now she had a headache, and it went on and on. Also, she's a real stalker. Yep, it seems all she does all day is spy on our neighbors. Did you know that the neighbor to the right of us walks around his yard in his wife's pink fluffy dressing gown and slippers? And the neighbor opposite sings Christmas tunes to her dog. Ugh, who cares? But if I dare yawn or show any sort of disinterest, she yells at me. So I feigned interest by saying things like, "Oh, is that so? Oh, right. Please go on." The nagging didn't stop when I was at work either, as she constantly texted me telling me to come home early to fix the light bulb, faucet, or whatever else she'd managed to break. Geez, why were there so many broken things lately? Why was she deliberately ruining them so that I would rush home after work to fix them? No, that couldn't be possible, right? One time during work, she messaged me saying the washing machine was leaking everywhere and asked me to call a mechanic. I didn't understand why she couldn't call one herself, as I was at work. Anyway, I forgot to do it, so she called my work number and demanded I go home immediately. The problem was that my work colleague answered the phone. The poor lad actually had to hold the phone away from him as she was shrieking so loudly. "You broke it, so come home and fix it immediately." I grabbed the phone off my colleague and replied, "Huh? How is it my fault?" She replied, "Duh, because you wear 3 outfits in a day and I only wear 1, so you broke it, not me, so come and fix it." Yeah. I failed to see the logic in her argument. I just didn't know who she was anymore. Where had the lovely Ariel from the old days gone? Oh, how I longed to be single again. Then, when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. My workplace was celebrating its 10th anniversary, so my boss held a party and invited everyone and their families. Oh no. The last thing I needed was my controlling wife embarrassing me. But Ariel checked my emails and found out about the party. She immediately repeated her rule. "Dinner is not allowed outside unless you take me with you." I forced a smile and acted excited to have her joining me. Hope nothing happens, though. We'd been at the party all of 5 minutes, and I was politely smiling at my female colleague, when Ariel turned red with anger, then spilled her wine over this woman's dress, said, "Oops," then walked off. I passed my colleague some napkins and apologized. Why was Ariel so childish? I didn't want to lose my job because of her jealous rages. Then I found her talking to my boss. She was actually shouting at him for making me work overtime too often. What? My boss was fuming. Now I was sure I would end up being fired. But thank God, through some miracle and a lot of groveling to my boss, I didn't lose my job. I was feeling so down about it all. So on one of my lunch breaks, I called my friend Matthew. I've known him for years. In fact, back in our school days, he had a huge crush on Ariel. And we both tried to win her heart. Anyway, that's in the past. I needed to vent, so I said to him, "Back at school, you and I both frantically chased Ariel. We even fought for her. Back then I thought I'd won, but now I think you're the one who had the lucky escape." Matthew replied, "Do you know why your married life is so stuffy? It's because she loves you too much. If you need more freedom, it's so easy. You just need to make your wife love you less. Don't worry, I'm here to help. At this point, I was pretty much willing to try anything. Besides, he was my friend, so he had my back, right? So the plan was to find Ariel a demanding job in another town. Then I'd only have to see her on weekends. So I asked my old friend to let Ariel work as a newscaster on his about-to-be bankrupt radio station. Ariel was so excited when she got the job offer. She begged me to quit my job and to go with her, but I disagreed. I made excuses that my job was too good to quit and encouraged her that it was a good opportunity for her and that I would visit her on weekends. After that, the life I always longed for arrived. It was so blissful coming home from work and not having her nag me. I could put my feet on the couch, fall asleep whenever I wanted, and go out for dinner with my colleagues without having to take her along with me. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. Yes, it wasn't long before I found myself pining for her like a puppy. I even slept clutching one of her sweaters. Then it suddenly all made sense. Ariel had only acted that way because she was bored and lonely stuck at home all day. She longed to have me to talk to, and yet all I did was make fun of her. Ugh, I was a terrible husband. I'd been a foolish idiot, and I wanted my wife back, so, without delay, I bought the biggest bunch of flowers I could find and drove to Ariel's place in the other city. But when I pulled up outside, I saw her standing outside talking to someone. It was Matthew. That sneaky, conniving snake. Then I saw him take her hand. I stormed up to him and punched him in the face. Ariel panicked. "Alex, are you crazy? What the hell are you doing?" Then she checked Matthew's bleeding nose. I was furious, so I blurted out, "He's a liar. He told me to send you away just so he could worm his way into your life." She looked at me in surprise and stammered, "What? You sent me away? I earned this job and I chose this life." "No," I shook my head. "I set it all up. I'm sorry, I'm a fool." I was about to hug Ariel, but she pushed me away and said, "Are you bored with me? Why don't you... You're a coward." After that, Ariel ran into her house and locked the door. I begged her to hear me out, but she ignored me. I had no choice to drive home sad and alone. I went back to her house each day and tried apologizing, but she never answered the door. Each day I left her a gift on her doorstep, such as chocolate cake, penguin plushie as they're her favorite animal, and a picture of us together. She took the gifts, but she still wouldn't answer the door. But then one night when I was waiting in front of her house, I saw her running towards me. Could it be that she'd forgiven me and was coming to embrace me? Nah. A bandit was chasing after her and was trying to grab her handbag. I rushed forward and tackled this bandit to the ground. She was so relieved I was there to save the day, and she flung her arms around me. After that, she forgave me and moved back home. I definitely learned my lesson now. I should always appreciate the happiness I have, instead of taking it for granted. But I guess I will still have to live on the edge for the rest of my life. Afraid that someday Ariel will find out the big secret I'm keeping. Yeah, I'm the one who hired that bandit. Surprise! Those secrets will have to come to me to the grave. Or Ariel will bury me 6 feet under by herself. I don't know anymore. Wish me luck, guys. Do you believe in fate? Well, I never did. I'm a 21-year-old college student studying finance and banking. So, yeah, numbers are my forte. Therefore, I'm a logical thinker. Horoscopes and chance meetings? As if. But then I met someone who changed it all. I'm Kai, by the way, and let me tell you my story. It all started one evening while studying. I got a serious craving for some Cheetos, so I went out to get some. That's when I saw a petite girl shouting at 2 huge guys in the park. "Hey, Bigfoot, did you really just litter? Pick it up now or I'll give you a good going over." Oh man, did this girl have a death wish? And was she drunk? The 2 guys didn't look happy. They approached her and one of them even raised his hand up like he was gonna hit her. But she quickly pushed his hand away, which only made him madder. Man, I didn't want to get involved in this. So I pretended I hadn't seen them and walked off. But then I was just a few steps away, I heard one of the guys scream. And the other guy said, "What the? Gross!" I could have just carried on walking, but nope, my curiosity got the better of me. So I turned around and saw that one guy was covered in vomit. Then the girl pointed at me and said, "Honey, there you are." Then she fainted. Huh? I didn't know her. I was staring at them, looking perplexed, when one of the dudes yelled, "Why are you still standing there? Quickly take your crazy girlfriend home if you don't want to taste my fist." I was so scared I hurried over and carried this girl off. I had no idea who she was or where she lived. This was crazy. I placed her down on a nearby bench and looked around for those guys, but luckily they'd gone. I didn't know what to do, so I left her there and walked off. But then I started to feel bad. Was I too heartless? What if something else happened to her? So I went back and gave the girl a piggyback ride back to my house. Geez, she was so much heavier than she looked. As soon as I dropped her onto the couch, her phone rang, so I answered it. Hello? Then the person on the other end of the line asked, Who are you? Where's my friend? I muttered out my address and was about to tell her to come pick up her friend, but she already hung up. Why was she so rude? I'd almost bust my back carrying her friend to safety. How annoying. This night has been far too dramatic for me, and worse still, I didn't have any Cheetos. I decided to take a shower, then get some sleep. But as soon as I stepped out of the bathroom, the doorbell rang. I presumed it must be the girl's friend, so I answered the door. Then 2 cops immediately pushed me against the wall and handcuffed me. Before I could fathom what was happening, one of them said kidnap and assault accusations had been made against me, and I was escorted to the station. What? I tried to explain what happened, but they wouldn't listen to me. That night, as I sat in the cold, uninviting cell, I found myself regretting my kindness. I didn't sleep a wink. I just hoped the next morning came quickly so that I could confront that girl about this false accusation. But before I could do that, the cops released me at dawn. The girl had sobered up and told them it was all just a misunderstanding. Well, luckily, she still remembered a bit, or else I didn't dare to imagine it anymore. I swore I would never get involved with anyone in need ever again. No good deed goes unpunished, for real. A few days later, when I was watching TV, someone knocked on my door, and you wouldn't believe it. It's the drunk girl. I looked at her suspiciously. What are you doing here? The girl didn't say anything. Instead, she coldly slipped past me and entered my house. Huh? What was she playing at? Then she glared at me and asked me about that night. After I told her everything that happened, she laughed. Okay, I believe you. If I didn't, you'd know about it. She held her fist in front of me. I startled and almost fell off my chair. Then she chuckled. Now I'm hungry. Go make your guests some food. What was with this girl? She was so direct and bold. I glanced at her and said no, but she continued. If you don't, I'll go to the cops and change my statement. Then she got up to leave, so I quickly said, Okay, fine. Then reluctantly searched my cupboards for food. Trusted spaghetti, how you never fail me. So I prepared bolognese for us. While she was eating, she said, I'm Nora, by the way, the best screenplay writer major in the country. She winked. She thanked me for the food, then left. Phew, that'd be it now, surely. Nope, turns out this was just the beginning. The next morning, she texted me, come pick me up for college ASAP, else I'm calling the cops. Was she being serious? Then she sent me another message with her address and told me to hurry up. I rushed over there and she got into my car, glared at me, and said, You're late. And that's how I somehow became this Nora girl's servant. Her calls and messages could come at any time. And she would always force me to do things for her straight away. One time I was soaking in the bath when she texted and demanded I bring her some chocolate. Another time she called me at 2 a.m. and told me she was bored, so I had to come over and play some video games with her. I also became her unpaid Uber driver. Every day, from home to school and back. And it's inevitable that I overslept once, so Nora bombarded my phone with tons of texts and calls. I groggily answered, and she used her calling the cops threat again to force me to get there in 15 minutes. What a pain in the neck. Another time, I just stepped out of the house to go and hang out with my friends when Nora showed up and insisted that I had to take her to the cinema. She wouldn't take no for an answer, so I had to cancel on my friends and go watch some bland movie with her. Such a troublesome girl, right? But strangely, as time went by, I started to find Nora less annoying, and instead found myself smiling when she texted me or called. On the days when she didn't bother me, well, my mood seemed to dampen. Was I crazy? I mean, she was cute, very spontaneous, and, well, there was no one else quite like her. But then all of a sudden the messages and calls stopped. Did she not want me around anymore? I miss Nora. Many times I had to stop myself from calling her. I should be happy I was out of Nora's control, right? Then one day out of the blue, my phone beeped. It was Nora. Come to the Starbucks on Vincent Street. Move it. You have 5 minutes. Geez, that bossy tone again. Still, I immediately drove to the address. When I got there, I saw Nora with a guy and a girl. I walked over to them and just sat down. Nora held my arm. Honey, why are you so late? I stared at her in surprise. She smiled and turned to the other two. This is Kai, my boyfriend. What? Did I get it wrong? Did she just say I was her boyfriend? Then she said, Kai, this is my former bestie Kim and her boyfriend Greg, who's also my ex. Awkward, right? But I have you now, so we can all be friends. Reading the situation, I realized I had to go along with it. So I stroked her hair and said, yes, my honey muffin, anything you want. My cheesy lines seemed to work, as they both looked annoyed, then left. So I turned to look at Nora and stammered. Did you just say I'm your boyfriend? Nora said nonchalantly, yeah, isn't that okay? If you don't like it, forget it. Then she was about to leave. I pulled her hand and said, yes, of course, sounds great. So that's how we became an official couple. We went on a few dates and she was her usual demanding self. Not that I'd want her any other way. Then one time, after a month of dating, Nora dragged me to a Swan Lake in a nearby park. She looked at me for a long time and then said, Kai, I'm studying abroad for a year. I leave tomorrow. I glared at her in surprise and asked why she hadn't told me sooner. She continued, I guess I didn't want to make you sad, and I don't know if your feelings are big enough, so write down your feelings for me and give them to me tomorrow. That night, I carefully wrote down all my thoughts and feelings for her. I still had hope that this 1 year of long-distance love would be over quickly. The next day, I drove her to the airport and handed her my letter. To my surprise, Nora also gave me a letter and told me over and over that I could only read it when I got home. Of course, I obeyed her. Then read it as soon as I passed my door, and whoa, I wasn't expecting this. In it, Nora confessed all this time she was just using me to get revenge on her ex, and took advantage of me to get over him. That night we had first met, she found out about him and Kim, but now she regretted how she treated me. At the end of the letter, she wrote, if fate wants us to be together, then we'll meet again one day. What? I was so shocked, so I called to tell her she didn't need to feel guilty and that I forgave her. I kept calling, but it didn't work. I also asked her friends, but no one knew how to reach her. She disappeared from all social media, and just like that, she vanished from my life. I missed Nora so much and found myself hoping that fate would reunite me with her someday. Then one time while I was surfing YouTube, this web drama called My Destiny Is Yours caught my eyes. Curious, I decided to check it out. And I watched wide-eyed as my story with Nora played out in front of me through each episode. This definitely was written by Nora. But how would she end it? It stopped at the part where the girl left and cut off all contact with the guy. An announcement popped up on the screen. The finale was launching at 9 p.m. tonight. I anxiously watched the seconds tick by. During the last episode, the two characters met up at a Swan Lake. I had a hunch, so without a second delay, I immediately ran to the Swan Lake in the nearby park. My heart flipped when I saw a girl standing there. It was Nora. Man, I ran so fast and hugged her. She hugged me back, then said, I was a little nervous you wouldn't see the movie. Then she smirked. But it doesn't matter anyway. I could have just texted you, come to the Swan Lake now, and you would have come, right? Then we both burst out laughing and continued to hug each other. Well, you see, fate brought me and Nora together, and this logic-loving skeptic is now a big believer in destiny. How about you? Have you found your destiny yet?
Sometimes in life, we do things we might not be proud of. But honestly, if I had to go back and do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing. Please listen to my story and let me know if you think I did the right thing. It's been a crazy ride. I'm Delilah, and I grew up as an orphan. When I was only 5 years old, my parents were arrested as they belonged to some kind of mafia. I didn't have any relatives, so I was sent to an orphanage. I was too young to really understand it all. I just thought my parents were so busy with work, they didn't have time to take care of me. But later, I understood that my parents were bad people, and that they'd often hit me and even starved me whenever I was naughty. Over the next 4 years, I was adopted by 3 different families. The first 2 didn't end so well, so they sent me back. But the third family was really nice. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on our side, though. There was a car accident. I was lucky enough to survive, but my adoptive parents didn't make it. I was devastated and got sent back to the orphanage. I didn't understand why I was so unlucky. It really felt like the universe was punishing me. Years passed by and no other families adopted me. So as soon as I turned 18, I left and decided to start on my own. But it wasn't easy. I'd had no real education, and I couldn't find a decent job. I did a lot of random jobs, like pizza deliveries, handing out flyers on the streets, and working in a supermarket for a bit too. The money was never enough, though. I hate to admit this, but sometimes I stole groceries from work. However, one time I got caught, and of course, they fired me. That sucked. How would I be able to make it to tomorrow with $2 in my wallet now? I vented out with my coworker Casey about how miserable my life would be without that job. Then Casey just smirked at me and said she knew another way I could make some money. She said it was just a one-time thing and it would be risky, but the money would be enough to last me for years. I was eager to hear more, but you won't believe what it was. The job was to kidnap the daughter of a rich family and then demand ransom. Casey said all I had to do was take care of the kid for a few days in an abandoned warehouse, and when the parents paid the ransom, they'd send the kid back, and I'd be free to go with all the money. I mean, it sounded easy, right? It's not like I was actually kidnapping her. I was just taking care of her for a few days. More like a babysitter, so nothing could go wrong, right? The little girl was called Lisa, and she was just 2 years old. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, were well known, and they were stinkin' rich. The plan was actually so simple. Every Sunday, her nanny took her to the playground, and so that's where she'd be kidnapped from. You're probably wondering if it worked out. Well, I'm not in jail right now, so there you have it. I was waiting in the warehouse, and they delivered Lisa to me. Now, all we have to do is wait. The warehouse was pretty shabby, but it had enough to survive. And at first, Lisa cried a lot, and I seriously couldn't get her to stop. I tried playing her Baby Shark on YouTube. Believe it or not, it worked, and she stopped immediately. Later that night, though, Casey called and said Lisa's parents refused to pay and that the police were involved. Oh my gosh! So now what? They couldn't just leave me here with this random kid. The only option Casey could think of was that me and Lisa should hide out at Casey's grandparents' farm for a couple of years. That's when the case died down and everyone had forgotten about it. We could just leave Lisa outside a police station. This was insane! But what choice did I have? Lisa's face was now plastered on every newspaper and webpage. Also, not to mention the fact I knew nothing about raising a kid. What a disaster! But hey, at least I'd get to move to a farm. So the next morning, Casey's cousin, who drives vegetables from the farm to the city, picked us up and drove us safely to the farm. It was perfect, because Casey's grandparents didn't own a TV or the internet, so they knew nothing about the missing kid. Casey told them I was a single mom and had nowhere else to live, so they warmly welcomed us and said in return I could help them out on the farm. Those first few weeks were torture. Lisa was so naughty. Every time I fed her, she'd throw her food around. And once, she threw a hot bowl of soup over my head. After that, I was tempted to let her starve. I couldn't handle it. To be honest, I hated her. I regretted so bad getting involved in this mess every time I saw her face. But then one night, she was lying on the bed, and I was impressed. She'd finally chilled out. I went to wake her up to take her down for dinner, and she was on fire! I started panicking and went to find a thermometer, and her temp was 39 degrees Celsius. I had to get her fever down. I asked Casey's grandparents to help me buy some medicine for her. I was seriously panicking because she was shaking now. I just picked her up and held her in my arms, and I realized I would protect this little girl no matter what. She looked so innocent, and I actually felt my heart open up to her. We must have fallen asleep because I suddenly woke up an hour or so later and was relieved to see her body temp was back to normal. After that, I felt closer to Lisa. And honestly, she was pretty cute. Soon, I was sewing her little dresses and cooking her favorite foods. We actually had so much in common. We both loved mac and cheese, hated carrots, and were addicted to chocolate. Pretty soon, a year had flown by, and Lisa was starting to speak. And then she started to sing. And oh man, she's the most adorable thing on earth. Then one day, she turned to me and said, "Mama." I almost cried. I felt so happy, but it wasn't right. I had to give her back to her parents. She didn't deserve to live a life away from them, like I had with my parents. So I did something crazy. I saw Lisa's parents were looking for a part-time maid, so I used a fake name and applied for the job. I wanted to see if it was safe to take Lisa back without getting caught, but it was immediately clear that something wasn't right. It was like they didn't even miss her. I mean, imagine if your child had been kidnapped. Surely you'd be crying a lot, right? This family was different. All they seemed to do was work. It was so easy to sneak around their house. They left for work at 9 a.m. every morning and would only come back at 7 p.m. The only one I had to be careful of was Mrs. Garcia, the housekeeper. One day, I was searching for Lisa's room to see if I could get some of her toys, but I couldn't find it anywhere. There wasn't a single room that looked like it belonged to a 2-year-old. Had they seriously already packed up her room? Just given up hope? So, I decided to search the basement, and jackpot! I found a box full of toys. But that's not the only thing that was there. There was a crumpled up photo, too. I got curious and unfolded it, and saw a little girl in the photo. I froze. That little girl wasn't Lisa. She was about 5 years old and looked familiar. It's like I've seen her before. Could it be? Is that me? But why did Lisa's parents have a photo of me? Suddenly, Mrs. Garcia appeared and said, "What are you doing down here? I knew there was something fishy about you. I'm going to call Mr. Taylor." She quickly took out her phone and was about to dial his number. I grabbed it from her, but oh man, this old lady was strong. We were fighting over her phone, and then she let it go. She looked shocked and pointed at me, then in a trembling voice said, You are Delilah, aren't you?" I was stunned. How did she know my real name? Oh God, she must have known I'd kidnapped Lisa. I was probably about to go to jail. But then she continued speaking, and I thought I was going to faint. Lisa's parents were also my biological parents, which made Lisa my sister. Mrs. Garcia had recognized me because she saw the scar on my arm, which she said I'd got from falling out of a tree. She'd worked for my family since before I was even born. But then she said something that shocked me even more. "Don't come back to this family, Delilah. Please. It's for your own good. If you stay, you'll be in danger like poor little Lisa. They didn't care about her at all. They often left her starving, and then she got kidnapped. They haven't even bothered to look for her. They're cruel and heartless, and all they care about is money. Having a kid was just part of the cover-up for them and their illegal business. I really hope Lisa is in a safe place now. Anything is better than this family." Oh my God. This was seriously crazy. After all these years, I'd finally found my parents. But deep down, I knew Mrs. Garcia was right. If Lisa and I came back, our lives would be hell. Before I left the room, I asked Mrs. Garcia one last question. Did my parents look for me when they got out of jail? Mrs. Garcia shook her head sadly. Let's be honest, though. I knew the answer before I even asked. So I went back to the farm and continued to take care of Lisa. Now that I knew she was my sister, I loved her even more and promised myself that I'd give her the life she deserved. It's been 10 years now, and we're doing great. Our parents did do a bit of searching for Lisa, but only for like a month. Then they gave up. Mrs. Garcia had been right. They didn't care about Lisa or me. When it felt safe, Lisa and I moved to Canada. I started to work in a few different places and even took some classes. Turns out, I have a passion for plants, and I can thank my time on the farm for that. So I opened a small plant shop, and the business is going so well. Lisa is my motivation. She's the reason I work so hard and keep fighting for our lives. And now we're happier than we've ever been. When Lisa turns 18, I'm going to tell her everything. But for now, I'll let her think our parents aren't evil people and that they're just busy working in another country. So, what do you think? Would you agree I did the right thing? I think I did. I was sitting on the couch watching a movie with my mom and dad, when suddenly the door slammed shut and we all turned our heads to see what happened. Yep, that's my big sister Taylor making an entrance. She slumped down on the couch and banged her feet on the coffee table. Then, as she scrolled through her phone, she looked up at us and huffed out, why are you all gawping at me like I'm an animal in a zoo? Am I not welcome here? Flustered, my mom immediately replied, No, sweetie, we're all delighted to have you home. Then she turned to me. Anne, darling, go and get your sister a drink. I jumped up to my feet and did as Mom asked. I know what you're thinking. Why is everyone letting Taylor get away with her Little Miss Rude routine? You see, after a huge argument with Mom, she left home at 18 and didn't come back for 7 whole years. Mom seemed so pleased to have her back, so I decided to ignore Taylor's attitude and just go along with it. That afternoon, Mom asked me to go to the grocery store with her so we could buy Taylor her favorite foods, as well as a welcome back gesture. Then we spent ages preparing this delicious meal. I excitedly rushed up to Taylor's room and knocked on the door. Taylor, dinner's ready! She shouted back. Go away! But it's hamburgers, and we got a special dessert, I replied. Poof! I hate hamburgers, and there's no way I'm eating some sugar-laden dessert. I went downstairs and told Mom that she wasn't coming. Mom shrugged and tried to act like it was no big deal, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. Dad tried reassuring her by saying, She probably just needs time to settle in. Yeah, she's probably just tired, I added. Mom forced out a smile and thanked us both. Then she prepared a plate of food and asked me to bring it to Taylor. I knocked on her door and told her the food was outside. She shouted back at me, Take it away! I don't want it! I left it outside of her room, but later on when Mom went up to bed, she saw the untouched plate of food still there. She picked it up and she took it downstairs and made out like it was no big deal. She wasn't fooling me. I could tell that she was biting on her gum to stop the tears. When I was little, I idolized my feisty, beautiful older sister. I loved how she wore clashing colors, the cool ways in which she styled her hair, and her carefree nature. The problem was that she didn't seem to like me. All she ever did was call me a brat, slam her bedroom door in my face, and tell me to stay away from her. 7 years on, and I thought things would be different. She wasn't a teenager anymore. She was an adult. But nope, it seemed clear that Taylor hated me even more than ever. I don't know why. Didn't she view me as a proper sister because we had different dads? You see, my dad isn't her dad, as her dad left when she was a little girl. Then Mom met my dad and had me. I don't know. I just couldn't figure out why she still disliked me so much. As the weeks went on, Taylor didn't seem to settle in at all. Instead, her behavior worsened. She played loud music until the early hours of the morning. She covered the house in her clothes, plates, cups, etc. She was the messiest person ever, and never cleaned up after herself. One time, I came downstairs to see her sitting at the dinner table, munching on the sandwiches I'd made for school. Then, when I politely told her this, she snorted and said, "They're gross anyway, so I'm doing you a favor." Then she took Mom's car without asking her, and that meant she had to get the bus to work and ended up late. When Mom talked to her about it, Taylor just smirked, threw the keys at her, said, "You're out of gas," then walked off. Mom tried to keep calm and distracted herself by tidying up. So I tried hugging her, but she shrugged me off and told me to go away. It felt like Taylor could get away with everything, while I was the one getting snapped at for nothing. Still, Taylor must have been through a lot, right? Maybe she just needed some time to reconnect with Mom again. Then peace would be restored to our household. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I was reading in the living room when I heard voices coming from outside. I went to check it out and saw Mom and Dad talking to our new neighbor. They sure looked friendly. Then Taylor appeared and grinning said, "Making friends with the neighbor, are you, Mom?" Mom flustered out, "Taylor, this is Bill, my old classmate and our new neighbor." Isn't it a small world? So, you're Mom's age? Whoa, you don't look like it. Hang on, didn't you say you had a crush on some Bill? I see why. It's just a shame you rushed into remarrying, isn't it? Mom and Bill gave awkward looks, while Dad was gritting his teeth. Uh-oh, he didn't look happy. Lovely to see you, Bill. Mom muttered out before she pulled Dad and Taylor inside. Behind closed doors, she frowned at Taylor, but she just shrugged and left. This must have been playing on Dad's mind, as that evening I overheard him question Mom. Why did you never mention this Bill before? Honey, it was just a slight crush when I was a teenager. You know how it is. Yeah, sure. Dad scratched his head. Now I was stuck in the middle of all this tension, and it was all down to Taylor stirring the pot again. Then a couple of days later, Dad came home from work and immediately started freaking out. The bank called. Apparently I spent an obscene amount of money in a watch store. Was it you? Mom shook her head. I didn't know anything either. Then Taylor piped in. Speaking of buying stuff, we do need to get something for Bill's birthday. I mean, he did invite all of us, so it'd be rude not to. Uh-oh. I know Mom hadn't got round to telling Dad that Bill had invited the whole family to his party yet. Dad gave Mom a skeptical look and snarled, Oh, I see. You used my money to buy your high school sweetheart an expensive watch? Listen to yourself! You're being ridiculous! I'm not going to stand around and listen to you accuse me like this. Then Mom stormed off. I really wanted to tell them how this morning I'd seen Taylor lingering in their room, looking suspicious. But how could I bring this up when the atmosphere was so intense? I decided I needed to confront the source of the problem, Taylor. When it was just the two of us, I said to her, I know it was you. I saw you snooping around Mom's stuff. She just shrugged and replied, Little Anne, seems you're smarter than you look. Yeah, I did it. So what? Why are you being so cruel? Mom and Dad might split up because of you. To my shock, she grinned and she said, Well, that is my plan. Why should you get to play happy families when I'm stuck here without my dad? What? How could she be so selfish? I couldn't hold back my frustration anymore. How can you do this to Mom? I won't let you get away with this. Is that so? And what exactly is a quiet mouse like you gonna do about it? Then she shoved past me and walked off. I know I needed to tell Mom, but this meant breaking her heart. I was going to do it. I just needed to find a gentle way of telling her that her beloved daughter got a buzz out of ruining her life. But then, before I had a chance to figure this out, something terrible happened. The next day, I arrived home from school to find Mom and Dad in the kitchen. Dad had his arms folded and a stern look on his face, and Mom was in tears as she sadly peered down at some papers on the table in front of her. Divorce forms. What happened? Anne, you have to believe me. I didn't cheat on your father. Then Dad interrupted her. Stop lying. I can see it with my own eyes. Then he slammed a stack of photos onto the table. In the photos, Mom was kissing Bill in a cafe. Huh? This didn't make any sense. I don't understand. I didn't meet Bill yesterday. I met my friend Sandra. But Dad just got even more furious. Then he pulled his suitcase towards the door. Stop lying. I can see what happened clear as day. I can't trust you anymore. Then he left. Mom cried harder after that. I didn't know what to say or react. I wanted to believe Mom, but those photos told me differently. Suddenly, the door opened and Taylor strolled in, looked at Mom crying her heart out, and gave a delighted smirk, then went upstairs. That's right, Taylor! She must have something to do with this. So I kept an eye on her. As I passed her room, I heard her on the phone. And without a second thought, I went to find Mom and dragged her upstairs.
Anyway, I owe you this time, dude. Yeah, those photos did the job. Yeah, thanks. Your Photoshop skills are brilliant. They look so real. My mom froze. A second later, she pushed the door open. Then Mom looked at Taylor and mouthed the word, "Why?" Taylor burst out laughing, shrugged, then replied, "It's payback for loving her." She pointed at me. "More than you love me. I want you all to suffer for living happily together. Why does she have you both, while I have nothing?" Furious, Mom slapped Taylor across the face and shouted out, "I'm ashamed of you, and I want you to leave right now." Taylor clutched her face and snarled back, "With pleasure. I hate it here anyway." Then she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I hugged Mom, and we both started crying. My happy family had been destroyed, and all because my sister was jealous and thought Mom loved me more. It was all so crazy. Then, later that evening, Mom received a call from the hospital. Mom's face dropped when she told me that Taylor had been in a car crash. We rushed to the hospital, and the doctor told us Taylor needed emergency surgery. But as she'd lost lots of blood, she needed a blood donation. The problem is that she had a rare blood type, but luckily, Mom had the same. So without any hesitation, Mom told the doctor to take as much blood as Taylor needed just to save her. After the blood donation, Mom didn't recover as fast as expected. Instead, she turned weak and needed medical care. So now, Taylor was in the surgery room, and Mom was in the intensive care unit. This was terrifying. What if I lost them both? I called Dad and spilled out everything that had happened to him, and he immediately rushed to the hospital. The wait was agonizing, but when the doctor came and told me they were both going to be okay, and I could go and see Taylor, I cried with happiness. Seeing her lying there bruised and afraid, I saw a vulnerable side to her that I hadn't seen before. So I took her hand and told her what Mom did for her. She looked embarrassed and turned away from me and muttered out how sorry she was for everything. After that, I visited them both every day. Dad came to the hospital too to check they were okay, but he waited outside of Mom's room as he knew she was still mad at him. Finally, Mom came home. Then a week later, Taylor was also discharged. We went to pick her up, and even though Mom and her didn't talk, I could feel the warmth between them. That night, we were having a cozy dinner. Taylor coughed to clear her voice, then said, "Guys, I want to say something. I know I've been a total brat, and I'm sorry. Mom, I thought you didn't love me because I was a reminder of your previous life, and I was ruining your new, happy family vibes. But now I realize how sacred the mother-daughter bond is. You never left me out. I left myself out. And Anne, I'm sorry I haven't been the big sis I should have been for you. I was jealous of you, but I was wrong to be that way. I hope you can both forgive me." Dad also apologized to Mom for misunderstanding her. We were all blubbering, and then we all hugged each other. We didn't need to say anything. Our actions were enough. We were family, and we loved each other. Families aren't always straightforward, but family is family, through the good times and the bad. And they're always worth fighting for, regardless of how out-of-this-world annoying they can be at times. Trust me, I know all about it. I blinked open my eyes. Whoa, my head felt dizzy. And, why was I covered in scratches? My mind was totally blank. I couldn't remember what happened. The last picture flashing through my mind was a heated argument between me and some guy. Then I stormed off and now, here I am, in this gloomy place. I think it's a basement or something. It's cold, and it stinks of damp. Dang it! I cannot remember his face. I knew I needed to get out of here, and fast. I ran to the door and tried opening it, but to no avail.
It's locked! I slammed my hands against the door and shouted, "Anyone? Help!" I could hear footsteps approaching, so ignoring my throbbing palms and burning throat, I banged on the door and screamed out, "Open the door!" Oh my God! It's him! The guy I'd been arguing with before! He was holding a sandwich and smiling gently at me.
"Oh, Alice, my puppy. Are you awake? I thought you might be hungry."
"Who are you? You brought me here, didn't you? What do you want?" He looked confused, then sadly blurted out,
"Oh no, honey. You must have memory loss from the accident. It's your Josh here. I'm your boyfriend."
I squinted at him. He did look familiar, but what boyfriend? What accident? He showed me the photos on his phone. OMG! That was me with him, and we looked so happy together. But why can't I remember anything? I hit my head with my hands in frustration, while Josh just stood there against the wall staring at me and giggling. So maybe this Josh guy was my boyfriend, but that didn't explain why he'd locked me up in this dungeon. This wasn't a normal boyfriend thing to do. I rushed to the door, but he grabbed me in his arms. "Let me out! You definitely have some wicked intention going on bringing me here." I scowled.
"Oh my gosh, Alice. You've been watching too many movies. Do you really not remember anything?"
I gave him a clearly not look, then folded my arms.
"I guess the accident was pretty intense. We argued, then you insisted on driving while you were drunk, and then caused a fatal accident. Never mind. I think we shouldn't go in too deep about that right now. It must be traumatizing for you. But that's why I decided to bring you here, so the cops wouldn't arrest you."
What? Why couldn't I remember such a horrible thing? But looking at all the wounds on my face and body, maybe everything was exactly like what Josh said. No! I have to confess. I stuttered in tears.
"Are you crazy? Do you want to go to jail?"
But...
Alice, no buts. I'm gonna protect you and keep you safe."
This was a lot to process, so in a moment of panic, I found myself agreeing to his crazy plan. Josh said this was an emergency bunker back from his grandfather's time. Sure thing. I mean, it sure smelled musty. There's not even a window, just a flickering wall light. It felt like I was in a horror movie. Josh also told me that he'd taken my phone off me, so the cops wouldn't be able to trace it and arrest us both. And that's it. Every morning, noon, and night, Josh would bring me food and talk to me about his day.
"Puppy, I'm home."
Puppy? Oh, it sounded cute at first, but I soon became allergic to that word.
"Hey, puppy, eat this. Puppy this, puppy that. Puppy, puppy, puppy."
I was so fed up with the word puppy that at times I actually thought I was nothing more than a pet to him. Then each night, he insisted on rubbing my back so I'd fall asleep more easily. Sounds nice, right? But no, it wasn't. He rubbed it really hard, and when I asked him to stop, he just laughed. Obviously, he wasn't doing it to make me feel better, but regarded it as a pastime. Ugh! And that's not all. A few times, I'd wake up to see him sitting there, staring at me with this gummy grin on his face. Then, when I checked my hair, I saw that he'd tied loads of these dumb little bows in it. "Are you crazy? I'm not a kid!" I grumbled while pulling and throwing all those dumb things out of my head.
"But puppy, they look so cute. Tom always liked them."
I glared at him. Didn't bother saying anything anymore. Oh, and FYI, yes, Tom's his old dog's name. Okay, so I didn't need a genius to figure out that something was seriously up with this guy's head. But then, things got weirder. One time, he brought down food for us to eat together. It was fried chicken, and as soon as I smelt it, my eyes sparkled. I was about to take a piece when suddenly he pulled the plate away and took a big bite. I didn't even have time to react. Then he handed me the chicken thigh bone he hadn't finished yet.
"Help me with the rest, puppy. This part is too hard to gnaw."
I rolled my eyes at him and flushed up with anger. Seeing my reaction, he said,
"What's wrong, puppy? Tom always loved the leftovers."
"Are you crazy?" I screamed.
"Yo, I'm kidding. Don't you know how to take a joke?"
He grinned. Kidding? What kind of kidding is that? I've had enough of this. This place was driving me insane. I could hardly sleep at all because I couldn't even distinguish between day and night. Then, when I did close my eyes, I found myself tormented by the serious crime I'd committed. Josh was trying to save me. Yes, but I didn't ask him to do that. I couldn't live like this. I needed to face the truth. I had to turn myself in. The next morning, when Josh brought me breakfast, I told him what I wanted to do. Expectedly, he got mad and glared at me.
"Alice, why do you want to go to jail so badly?"
"I can't stay here forever. I have to face up to what I've done."
"But it's so peaceful here with me."
Peaceful? Was he being serious? It sure didn't feel peaceful. Instead, I felt like I was playing the role of his pet. I lurched forward, but Josh immediately grabbed me so I couldn't move. I tried squirming my way free, but he was a strong guy. Suddenly, he covered my nose with a handkerchief and my eyes closed. Then everything turned black. I slowly opened my eyes. I was in the same familiar room, but bars. I saw bars! Ugh! I was in a cage! Then I kicked something. It was a water bowl!
"Puppy, you're so naughty. I can't lose you, so I've put you in here."
He grinned at me as he handed me a sandwich. I chucked it away, then screamed at him to let me out. Seeing this, he immediately left and returned with a bunch of plush toys and dropped them in the cage.
"Hope they'll make you happier."
Then he tried to stuff the sandwich into my mouth. Furiously, I took a bite and spat it in his face, then sneered while throwing the toys at him. Geez, some of them even squeaked.
"Wow. Okay."
His demeanor changed, and his eyes turned scary.
"If that's what you want, don't blame me later."
Things were different after that. Each day, he only gave me a bowl of those gross-smelling biscuits, then he'd just sit there gawping at me. At first, I refused to eat them. But in the end, I was so exhausted that I gave in, even though I'm pretty sure they were dog biscuits. Ugh! I realized that resisting him wasn't benefiting me at all. It was only making him act more horrible. That's when a genius plan popped into my head. So the next time when Josh appeared with the biscuits, I smiled sweetly at him and said, "Josh, baby, it's been so long since we've been on a date. How about you go and get us a bottle of wine, and we can spend some quality time together?" His eyes lit up, and of course, he agreed without hesitation. He hurried off to get the wine.
"Cheers to us!"
"Josh, you're the love of my life, and I'm so grateful to God for bringing you into my life. Please stay with me forever." I flashed a sweet smile and whispered in his ear. Every time he took a sip of wine, I fluttered my eyelashes at him as I refilled his glass. To say I'm a Hollywood actress with an Oscar-worthy performance would be an understatement. Soon, Josh was so drunk he went cross-eyed. He fell to the ground before I even finished pouring him the last glass of wine. Seizing the opportunity, I stepped over him to get out, when suddenly, a hand grabbed my ankle. Oh no, I'm screwed! My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I immediately turned around, ready to fight him when, well, it turned out he was just dreaming. Phew. Thank God. I gently pulled my foot free and immediately dashed out of there. I climbed up the stairs to a living room
where I found my phone left on the table. I quickly grabbed it and ran out of that horrible house. My legs trembled, and I felt like they might give away beneath me at any second. But somehow, I managed to find the inner strength to keep on running. I couldn't use my phone as it was out of battery, and I was too disoriented to figure out where my home was. So, when I stumbled upon a police station, I walked toward it. I took a deep breath. This was a tough decision. I knew I was going to jail, but I couldn't live in creepy Josh's basement forever and be his substitute pet. No thanks. I had to face up to what I'd done. "Sir, I'm here to confess." The cop looked confused and told me there hadn't been a fatal accident recently. But then he said I looked familiar, so he looked up my name, and turns out my family had reported me missing. That liar Josh had tricked me. It was all a ruse so he could imprison me. How vile! I charged my phone, and up popped hundreds of messages and voicemails from my worried friends and relatives. This was all so overwhelming. I put my head down for a moment. Then all the memories gradually surfaced. I'd been in the mall parking lot, and I felt like someone was following me. So I hid in the corner, and that's when Josh appeared. So I asked him, "Why are you following me?" "Alice, I love you. Please come back to me." I rolled my eyes and started walking away from him. "Go away, weirdo! We're done!" Then he grabbed my shoulder. I shook myself free and ran away, when a car came out of nowhere and... Ugh! Yes, of course. Josh was my crazy, controlling stalker ex. So he must have taken advantage of my unconsciousness to take me back to his basement and come up with his bonkers plan. Then to make things even easier for him, I ended up with memory loss. Typical! It was a nightmare. But thankfully, it's over now. The cops took my statement, and soon after that, my family came to pick me up. They all burst out crying, and we hugged each other tightly. It's taking a while to get back to normal life after all the trauma, but I'm getting there. I do want to vomit whenever I hear anyone say the word puppy. Ugh. However, this didn't stop me from getting my own rescue dog, Lily the Corgi, and I never put bows in her fur. As for Josh, well, he was convicted for false imprisonment and has to stay in jail for 4 years. Who's in the cage now? Serves you right. I was out for my afternoon jog and decided to take a new route. Suddenly, I saw a huge European-style mansion and had to stop to gaze at it. The walls were covered in moss, and honestly, it looked pretty eerie. I looked up, and a flock of crows were standing on the roof cawing. It sent shivers up my spine, and immediately made me think of movies like The Conjuring or something. Wouldn't be surprised if that house was haunted. Suddenly, I got startled by the voice of an old lady.
"The mansion looks magnificent, doesn't it?"
I turned to look at her, and she continued,
"But you'd better stay away from it."
"Why?" I asked her. Then she looked at me more closely and said,
"Oh, you aren't a local here, are you?"
I told her I was from Minnesota, but that my parents had said I could spend the summer here with my aunt.
"Well, dear, let me tell you. The owner of this mansion was a young girl, super rich, but kept herself to herself. Rumor has it, she worshipped Satan. Can you believe it?"
I asked her, "So where is she now?"
"Oh, she mysteriously disappeared years ago, and the house has been abandoned ever since,"
the lady replied. Okay, this was seriously freaky. My hair was literally standing on end. But for some reason, I was more intrigued than ever. Oh, sorry. I should have introduced myself. I'm Ellie, a typical high school student, but also an avid detective story blogger. I spend a lot of my time on detective story forums and have always been attracted to weird and mysterious things ever since I was a little kid. Anyway, back to my story. So, one night, my aunt asked me to pop over to the grocery store to get some milk. On my way back, I passed the mansion and instantly got shivers. I looked up and saw a light flickering in a window on the second floor, like a candle or something. But no way. The old lady said the place was abandoned, right? The light kept flickering, and I couldn't stop watching. Suddenly, a shadow of a girl appeared. She was playing the violin, and the gloomy music was wafting through the cracks in the walls. Then, out of nowhere, a crow flew by screaming, "Gah!" I almost leapt out of my skin and ran straight home. How could anyone live in that freaky mansion? Wait a minute, what if I'd just seen the ghost of the owner who disappeared? Oh man, I had to figure this mystery out. I could even turn it into a detective story with a bit of horror thrown in for fun. As I lay there, I came up with the title, Real Life Death Mansion. And then I realized I could even make a YouTube video about it with real photos of the house and maybe even some footage taken inside as I uncover the mystery. Oh, this would be so good! I could barely sleep from excitement, and the next day, I asked my cousin Susan to come along and explore the mansion with me. Hey Susan, want to come check out that creepy mansion with me?
OMG, Ellie, are you crazy? You know that place is haunted, right? Like, full of ghosts and everything.
Yeah, that's why I asked you to go with me. I shrugged.
I would rather make a detour than walk past that house to get home. So what makes you think I would dare to go inside?
I tried to convince her it would be fun, but she kept refusing. Oh well, if no one dared to go into that mansion, then I shall be the first. Gathering up my courage, I went there alone. I managed to climb over the rusty iron fence that had almost fallen to pieces in the backyard. Then I noticed a door that was slightly ajar. As I got closer, I realized a satanic symbol was engraved on the door. Creepy! I closed my eyes, held my breath, and gently pushed the door open. The smell that hit me made me feel dizzy. A musty, abandoned kind of smell. I walked into the lounge, and it felt like I just walked into some old castle in France or something. There were cobwebs everywhere, and some massive ones hanging from the chandeliers. I looked around and noticed a portrait of a girl on the wall. She was beautiful, but her eyes looked so sad. Oh my, was this the owner? The one I'd seen playing the violin? I couldn't bear to look at the portrait any longer. It felt like her eyes were piercing my soul. I headed for the stairs and crept up as quietly as possible. I won't lie, I was terrified. It was so dark up there, and with every step I took, the floorboards creaked. I kept looking behind me, as it sounded like someone was following me. By this point, I'd broken out into a cold sweat. When I made it to the second floor, there was a long corridor ahead, but it was really weird. There was only one door. I walked towards it and pushed it open. It was a luxury room, definitely fit for a princess. And yup, there was the violin. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a picture. It was the same girl, but this time, her eyes were glowing red like fire, just like Sauron, the villain in The Lord of the Rings. I was so scared that I quickly turned the photo face down. This was when I heard the violin sound from somewhere. Okay, what was going on? The violin was right before my eyes, and I was supposed to be the only one in the house? I tried to calm down, took a deep breath, and walked in the direction of the sound next door. It was so weird, because the next door was an exact replica of the first room. Had I actually changed rooms? I walked towards the dressing table and noticed the photo in here was also turned face down. I picked it up, and it was the exact same photo, but this time, the face of the girl was bleached white. I dropped the photo in horror and ran off without looking back. I ran down the stairs 3 at a time, but when I reached the door, it was locked. I started banging on it, and by then I was hysterically crying. "Help! Help me!" I screamed. Suddenly, someone's hand touched my shoulder. My heart had definitely jumped out of my chest. Ah! I yelled at the top of my lungs, but when I turned around, there was this young guy standing there. A pretty cute one. Who are you?" I stuttered. He frowned at me and said, "Who are you? And why are you here?" I could barely speak as I was shaking so much. Then the guy said, "Come on, let's get out of here. You look horrified." Then he took out a key and opened the door. Are you a ghost or something?" I stuttered. He started laughing and said, "Pretty creepy place, right?" I asked him if he saw the photos too, and he said, "Yes, terrifying. Like something out of a horror movie," I added. "Exactly. Perfect setting for a horror movie." I stared in confusion, and he laughed and said, "Yup, we're making a movie. I mean, I'm gonna rent this place to make a horror movie." Then he introduced himself as Jack, a young director who was interested in detective and horror movies. He was just checking the place out to see if it was suitable. I couldn't believe it. Wow, this is literally a dream come true. I've been writing detective stories since I could hold a pen, and I've always hoped I'd become a screenwriter on horror and detective movies one day. I'm so honored to meet you. I'm Ellie, by the way. Then Jack replied, "The pleasure's all mine. It's a pretty exciting industry to be in. I'd love to read some of your stuff sometime." I couldn't stop grinning. Then suddenly, another person showed up. Jack introduced him as Michael, a member of his film crew. But compared to how friendly Jack was, Mike was serious and intimidating. Jack could tell that I was nervous, so he laughed and said, "Michael's been under a lot of stress, so he looks a bit grumpy, right?" I just smiled shyly and asked Jack if I could have his number. As I walked home, I couldn't believe how happy I felt. Who knew such a scary adventure would turn into an epic opportunity? I texted Jack right away, saying I would love to learn more about his film, and I had to admit, I might have had a slight crush on him. He was so cute. I kept checking my phone, but he hadn't replied. That was so disappointing. But then, a few days later, he asked me out for coffee. I was so excited, and seriously, we had the best time. He even offered to drive me home. When I got into the car, he told me to close my eyes. Eek! Maybe he was going to kiss me. I was so nervous, but suddenly, something hit my face, and I didn't know anything else. When I woke up, I found myself in some kind of warehouse, with my hands and feet tied, and my mouth taped shut. Oh my God, had I been kidnapped? Where was Jack? Suddenly, I heard a noise outside. I looked through the window and saw Jack and Michael talking to each other. What? Did the two of them plan this? But why? A moment later, Michael left, and Jack came towards me and removed the tape from my mouth. I started screaming, "Why are you doing this to me?" Then Jack said, "Listen, I'm not gonna hurt you, I swear, but there's something I need to tell you." Then he confessed that he was a member of a criminal organization named Iron Gloves. His gang were operating from the mansion, and so everything from the story of the mysterious missing girl, the ghost playing the violin, the eerie photos, were all made up by them. They did it so that no one would dare approach their headquarters. According to the gang's rules, any outsider that entered the mansion would be killed, to protect the secrecy of the group. Michael had seen me enter and reported it to the boss. So Jack had been forced to carry out the mission, but he didn't want to do it, so that's why he pretended to kidnap me. Dear good God, this was too much! He asked me to leave right away, but I was worried about him. He said, "Don't worry, I've been wanting to leave for a long time, and so I have a plan." Fast forward 2 years, and now I'm a freshman majoring in screenwriting. It's so exciting chasing my passion, but I still think that summer at my aunt's was one of my best yet. Terrifying, but thrilling. Oh, and as for Jack, after we chatted in the warehouse, he let me go, and I quickly packed up all my stuff at my aunt's and flew home. A few weeks later, I saw an article that said he'd turned himself in, and that the police had caught the Iron Gloves gang. Now, Jack's in prison, but will soon be free. I have a feeling that deep down, he's a good guy, and I hope that I'll have the chance to meet him again and get to know the real him better. Who knows? His real-life experience might help me write one hell of an awesome story, too.